Good morning. It's Gary. Welcome to another edition of the Geezerville Chronicles. A while back, I promised a story coming up that was called something like Mickey Mouse and the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Well, today we're going to take that one on. I was reminded of that story when I was reading a book recently by Yuval Harari, and it's called Nexus. And in there, he made a metaphor, and the book was a metaphor on Fantasia and the Sorcerer's Apprentice and the Walt Disney creation. Well, it reminded me of the first time I saw the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it was when I was a youngster, probably around the age of between 8 and 10, I would guess. Because you see, the original Fantasia production by Walt Disney was done in 1940, and I was born in 1947. Great year, right? Anyway, the story begins with a scene where Mickey is the apprentice for this very powerful sorcerer, and they're in the sorcerer's den where he creates all of his concoctions. And Mickey is watching, and the sorcerer casts a spell, and he's mixing up potions in a big reservoir, and that's Mickey's job. He goes and he takes buckets and he walks all the way down the stairs to an outside fountain, and he picks up water and brings them back up and fills the sorcerer's reservoir for his brew pot. Okay. And so anyway, as the story unfolds, the sorcerer is looking through his book of particular potions and spells, and he casts a spell and then stands back and kind of watches everything and sits down, and eventually looks like he's getting tired, so he takes off his hat and puts his wand on the bench and goes upstairs, apparently to rest. Well, Mickey sees all this and he decides, hey, I'm going to try this. So he goes up and puts on the hat and the magic wand and goes through the book and looks at different spells and tries to cast a spell onto the broom that's standing in the corner. And the spell that he casts somehow by magic enables the broom to go and pick up the buckets and start doing what he was doing as an apprentice, going down the stairs, picking up the water and bringing it back up. And lo and behold, it works. And Mickey, of course, is amazed and delighted. So he watches this for a while as the broom goes up and down the stairs and picks up all the water. Well, he decides to get in the same chair the sorcerer did and begins to kind of, go to sleep, goes into a state of meditation and starts dreaming. And finally he wakes up from this dream, and there in front of him is a flood of water on the floor, because by this time, while he was dreaming, the water kept coming up. The broom kept carrying up the water. And so he becomes really paranoid and decides, I've got to stop this. And he doesn't really know how to stop what he started. So he goes and picks up an axe, gives the broom a big whack. The broom splinters into all kinds of pieces. And Mickey sighs in relief and thinks he's solved the problem. Well, it's just the beginning, right? Because if you remember the story, if you haven't seen it, the splinters begin to come alive, and they form arms and legs and become individual broomsticks with the capability of picking up buckets and going down the stairs. So they form an army of buckets going up and down the stairs, bringing water into the cauldron and the den of the sorcerer. And water is filling up everywhere. And Mickey is really frightened, doesn't know what to do. So he races up again to where the sorcerer has his book of spells, and he's paging through that book and looking for a solution on how to stop what he started. Well, it's kind of too late at this point because the genie's out of the bottle. He's released a power that he doesn't know how to control. And he stands back and is about to panic, and all of a sudden the sorcerer comes down the stairs. And he looks at Mickey and he scowls, and then he waves his hand, and pretty soon the water begins to dissipate and run down the stairs and drain the room back to its normal state. And Mickey looks at the sorcerer and he's kind of sheepish, and he knows he's done something wrong, and that's the only kind of look Mickey. You can just imagine he had a look of his own when he came into that mood, right? Well, he comes up to the sorcerer and looks really sheepish, and he takes off the hatch, which is now wet, and he puts it on the desk, and the tip folds over because it is wet, and he kind of backs away from the sorcerer, and finally the sorcerer makes a gesture, and it scares Mickey, and he picks up the buckets and runs down the stairs, and that's how the story ends. Well, the moral of the story is, don't mess with Mother Nature, right? Don't unleash a power that you don't know how to control. So that was the story, and Yuval Harari connected that story to the power of the networks that were forming, the information networks that connect all of us. Now, I'm not going to go down that junket. I want to use this metaphor, and I want to use it hopefully to a group of fellow geezers who are either on their path to Geezerville or there by now, right? And what I want to say about this is that I decided I wanted a way to share what has happened just since 2022 with AI in a way that I hope resonates, so that people begin to understand what's really happened and how unusual it is in the course of human history with the evolution of any one technology. So here's what I decided to do. I decided to conduct an experiment and to see if I could confound or produce a response, in essence, that would trick AI into giving me false parallels, false comparisons, etc. So I had a group of questions. There were 7 of them in total that I asked one after another to my chatbot. And the first one was a quote, and it was a rather dense quote that caught my eye from a book I was reading not too long ago called The New World. And in that book, there was this quote that said, "Life is the dancer, and you are the dance." Now, that's pretty abstract. I don't know if I've still come to grips with all the nuances and meaning that it could have. So I asked the chatbot, I said, okay, here's the quote, give me an interpretation. And in a matter of seconds, it spit out an interpretation with all the different nuances that it might have. Now, the next thing I decided to do was to say, okay, ask that same question and have the chatbot respond from the perspective of the philosopher Descartes. And the quote I gave was, "I think, therefore I am." And so the chatbot proceeded to answer that to the question, just like it did in the first one. It gave me interpretations, right? And then I said, okay, I want you to flip that quote, and the quote being, I am, therefore I think, and give me an interpretation of that quote. And what I was doing was trying to see how the chatbot would respond, because I was leading it in the direction of a different kind of philosophical thought, from rationalism to Jean-Paul Sartre 300 years later, that was one of the founders of existentialism. And so the ChatGPT again responded, split second. Okay, so, and the analysis was thorough. I'm hoping you'll just take my word for it. I was really impressed by it. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to ask the chatbot to take on the viewpoint of both of those two philosophers, Descartes and Sartre, and interpret the original quote. Life is the dancer and you are the dance. And I asked the chatbot, how would each philosopher interpret that quote from their own perspective and philosophical thought? Now, you got to admit that's kind of complex and abstract, right? Well, the chatbot impressed me to no end. And it compared both. And then I said, how might each philosopher respond and argue their position in relation to the first quote? And again, it responded. And then I asked it, okay, smarty pants, now I want you to define existentialism. And it did that. And then I came to the last question. And I thought, I want to know how an existentialist would view the recent development in artificial intelligence and take on the mindset of Jean-Paul Sartre in doing that. Now, this is where it got really interesting, because Sartre and existentialists believe in free will, and that essentially you develop your meaning in life, and it's up to you. It's a matter of choice, and it's the freedom of choice that's confounding all of us in the minds of an existentialist. Well, AI, one would argue, is deterministic in the sense that when you program it, you're giving it an identity on its own based on the data that it's fed. So does it determine its own existence or not? Now, to answer that, I'm going to go to one of the most interesting quotes in that question that I gave to the bot. And it says, here it is, the development of AI also places significant responsibility on humans. Sartre's notion that we are condemned to be free means that we must take full responsibility for the consequences of our creations, including AI. Existentialism would challenge humanity to confront the ethical and existential implications of creating intelligent systems that could potentially impact freedom, agency, and meaning. Now, I don't know about you, but the purpose of going through that experiment was to see what I could push, not in the future, but right now, what AI is capable of. And honestly, my conclusion is this. That whole experiment took me about 20 minutes to conduct. The responses were instantaneous. The bottom line is I would never have been able to compete with him as an individual if somebody were to ask me that bank of questions one after another. I doubt that any of my friends would be able to. I doubt that you could walk down the street and find anybody that could perform to that level of insight and comparison and logic turnarounds that chatbot did right now, today, without any further advancement or evolution. And I doubt whether if I sat in front of a group of experts in their own respective fields of philosophical thought, that I could have drove that kind of understanding out in maybe hours, maybe even days from that group by bantering it back and forth and looking at all the possibilities. So, what's my point? It's twofold. One, we're in a time when we have to be aware of the lesson that Mickey Mouse learned, in that story that I first told. If you're dealing with great power, you must be careful before you unleash it. And we have unleashed AI. There's no stopping it. There's billions of dollars just in the last 2 weeks, not counting what the president said with his Stargate program. I can count up from just 3 companies over $180 billion in expenditure for just next year. So this is going to happen, and we need to be careful. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of people, and remember, I hope my desire is to drive conversation to the middle on things we can all appreciate and understand that are going to affect us. So I tried to think about this in the minds of geezers and the caretakers of geezers, and look into the future and ask the question, is this something I need to be afraid of or concerned, or should I ignore it? Because I know it must be having an effect on that segment of a population. I mean, we're talking about 60 million Americans in the population group above 60 years of age, right? So here's my thinking. Yes, there could be negative consequences, but look at this. I vision right now that within 2 to 3 years, if I'm hopefully still alive, walking through the gauntlet toward Geezerville, if I'm still alive, I could receive significant benefits to support my mobility, like robots who could conduct tasks on my behalf through verbal commands, visual awareness. They can see the environment, prevent obstacles, tripping, support, help me get things, lift things, etc. Mobility is a big deal when you're a senior, and falling is a big deal when you're a senior. So I think that's one area. Overall security, the ability to ask questions for help. You can either ask the question, it will be there, or that capability will be there within next year. You can currently write a prompt of any kind and get a question, just like I did in the experiment. If you want to get into a new hobby or a task, you can ask it to plan that task for you, give you all the information, guidelines you need, which can benefit seniors in trying to find meaning in their life, dealing with loneliness, dealing with issues of isolation. So I see many benefits. And I'm hopeful that they'll occur now with the pace of this evolution of this technology easily within the next 3 to 5 years. And it's added great benefit to my life now. I'm hoping to finish a book that I started almost 25 years ago, and I had the book fully outlined. I had all the points in it. There were 41 different sections in the book. I had stories behind each. It was a nonfiction book dealing with a subject that I think is relevant today, and I gave up on trying to write it because it was too hard, too much of an isolationist activity, but I enjoy writing. So now with this partner I have, I'm hoping to be able to finish that book in the next couple of years with what I've already done over 10 years ago. So I'm going to end this now, but I hope this story has been helpful, and I hope it's created some value and perspective that you might not have had. And after all, that's the purpose of what we do here on our trek to Geezerville. So I hope you'll join me next Tuesday for another video, and I'll see you again then, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot. Every day is special, and it's your turn to make some hope and share it with somebody else. Thanks a bunch.